Story 1. The night the radio spoke back. My glove stuck to the push-to-talk button. Not because it was wet, because it was tacky, like it had been brushed with syrup and left to dry. I ripped my hand away and watched a thin strand stretch from my finger to the mic, trembling in the beam of my headlamp before snapping. The radio hissed, then clicked like someone had pressed their own transmit. "Unit 12, a voice said. Calm. Familiar. My voice. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat went tight the way it does when you swallow wrong and suddenly remember you can choke to death on nothing. The campsite beyond the trees was supposed to be empty. Site 14 had been closed since sundown. Hazard tree, posted tape, the whole deal. Yet my flashlight cut across a picnic table and caught fresh condensation where a forearm had just been. A cooler lid was open. A lantern burned low, blue flame fluttering. Someone had been here seconds ago. The radio clicked again. "I can't see." "You," my voice said, patient and irritated like I was talking to a lost hiker. "Stop moving." Leaves rustled behind me. Not wind. Measured. Footsteps trying to land where my own had landed. I spun and the beam hit nothing but trunks, Douglas firs packed tight, their bark blackened in strips like old burns. My patrol truck sat in the pullout, engine ticking as it cooled. The gate down the service road was locked behind me. The nearest open campground was almost 3 miles away. There was only the hiss of pine needles and the steady, wrong presence of someone matching my breath. I forced myself to whisper, "Dispatch, copy?" Even though dispatch had gone offline at 2100 for the winter staffing schedule. No one should have been monitoring this frequency. No one should have been able to talk back. The radio replied instantly. "Copy. Stand by." My own cadence. My own little habit of clipping consonants. The way my academy instructor used to bark at me for sounding like I was chewing gravel. A twig snapped to my left. I turned, light cutting sideways, and saw a face between 2 trees. Pale oval, eyes reflecting like an animal's. It wasn't looking at my light. It was looking at my chest, at the badge patch, like it was reading me. Then it stepped back and vanished with the kind of speed humans don't have unless they're running for their life. My heart beat hard enough to make my vest shift. I moved toward the site, toward the only real thing, the lantern, the cooler, the damp table. Someone had been camping in a closed site. That was the call. That was the paperwork. That was the world making sense. But the closer I got, the more the air changed. The smell under the pines thickened into something sweet and rotten, like meat left too long in a car trunk. My light found a strip of yellow tape tied to a tree, fluttering. It hadn't been there earlier. I'd logged the closure myself. I knew exactly what knots I'd used. This tape had my handwriting on it. Closed. Do not enter hazard tree. The letters looked like they'd been traced by someone who'd watched me write 1,000 times and never once learned what it felt like to hold a pen. Behind me, the radio clicked. "You're going to make this harder." I backed away from the tape. My boot heel hit something soft. I looked down. A baseball cap. Park issue. The same model I wore. It was flattened, damp. The crown caved in like something had pressed it into the dirt with a palm. On the inside brim, in black Sharpie, was my name. Morrow. My stomach crawled. I didn't just feel afraid. I felt invaded, like someone had reached into my pockets while I was still wearing the pants. I swallowed against bile and forced myself into procedure. Procedure is the only thing that keeps you from becoming a story other rangers tell over bad coffee. "Whoever's out here," I called, You're trespassing. Identify yourself." The woods answered with a slow exhale of wind that didn't touch my face. And then, from deeper in the trees, came the sound of someone dragging something heavy. Wood on dirt, a long scrape. Stop. Scrape again. Like a cooler being pulled by one handle. Like a body. The radio crackled. "You already identified me." I lifted my flashlight and walked toward the sound, because that's what you do when your job is to walk toward the thing everyone else runs from. My hand hovered near my holster, thumb hooked against the retention strap, the way we're trained. It didn't make me feel safer. It made me feel like I was pretending. I crossed the boundary of Site 14. The temperature dropped so fast, my teeth ached. The lantern flame shrank, dimming until it was a sick little bead. The trees around the site felt closer, bent inward like they were listening. The scrape stopped. Silence. Thick. Then a whisper from behind my ear. So close the hair on my neck lifted. "Don't look at it." I jerked around, flashlight flailing. Nothing. Just the dark. But I smelled someone's breath, hot, sour, like coffee and old cigarettes. My radio clicked again. "Look at it, Ranger Morrow. You need to remember." I aimed the light toward the center of the site. Something lay beside the fire ring. At first it looked like a duffel bag. Then my beam caught a reflective strip and my brain did that awful correction, the one where it finally allows the truth in. It was a uniform jacket. Park Service green, torn at the shoulder, a badge patch half ripped away. And inside the jacket, bulging it from within like a stuffed animal, was a human shape folded wrong. Knees too high, arms twisted under the torso, the way you'd fold a person if you didn't understand joints, if you only understood that bodies can be made smaller. I tasted copper. I don't know if I'd bitten my tongue or if fear has its own flavor. The face in the bundle was turned toward me. It was me. Not a photo resemblance. Not kind of. It was my nose, my chipped front tooth, the freckle near my left eyebrow. My eyes were open. They were wet. They were tracking my movements with tiny, desperate flicks. And his mouth was stuffed with something yellow. Closure tape. I stumbled back, heel catching on the cap, nearly going down. The thing in the jacket, the me in the jacket, made a sound I'll never forget. A muffled, strangled hum, like someone trying to scream through adhesive. His cheeks were raw where the tape had been forced in. His lips were cracked and bleeding. He lifted one hand toward me. The wrist bent the wrong way, like a puppet with slack strings. The radio crackled warmly, almost affectionate. "That's the part you always forget," my voice said. "You always run before you watch what happens." The lantern went out. Darkness slammed down, immediate and total, like a hood pulled over my head. I hit my flashlight switch again. Nothing. Again, nothing. The beam was dead. The batteries had been fresh. My radio, though, was still alive. Its backlight glowed faint green in my hand. And in that dim glow, I saw another hand reach from behind a tree, pale fingers curling around bark, mirroring the hand I had just seen in the jacket. Watching me. Waiting. The bundle in the dirt shifted. I heard cartilage pop. I backed away blindly, boots scuffing pine needles, trying not to turn my back on the sight and trying not to look at what I'd already looked at. My own breathing sounded loud enough to draw predators. My radio whispered, "Stop!" Like a lover, like a warning, like an order. My shoulder hit a tree. I spun. Another tree. The campsite was gone. The open space vanished, as if the woods had simply closed in around it. I swung my arms out and touched trunks on both sides. Too close. Too tight. Like I'd stepped into a thicket that hadn't been there a moment ago. A thin laugh came from somewhere ahead. My laugh. The forest made a new sound, rubber on dirt, a vehicle idling. I froze. I listened, straining. It was a truck, a parked truck, mine. The same uneven idle from the injector that maintenance kept promising to fix. Headlights flared between branches, stabbing white. Then the driver's door opened, and I heard my boots on gravel, my gait, my slight drag on the left heel from an old ankle injury. A flashlight beam swept through the trees. It found me. The voice from the dark called out, bright and official. "Park ranger, hands where I can see them." My own voice, coming from someone else, aimed at me like I was the trespasser, like I was the problem. I lifted my hands slowly, palms out. My radio was still in my right hand. It clicked, transmitting without me touching it. "I've got him," my radio said in my voice. "He's at the closure. He's confused." The beam stayed on my face. I couldn't see past it. The person holding the light stayed just out of the cone, a silhouette with a brimmed cap and a shoulder patch. "Step forward," he said. I did, because the alternative was to run into a forest that had already proven it could rearrange itself like teeth closing. As I stepped into the light, the silhouette leaned in, and I saw my own face, clean and uninjured, eyes calm, mouth relaxed in a practiced ranger smile. He reached out and gently took my radio from my hand. His grip was warm, human, real. "Thank you," he said softly, still in my voice. "You're making this easy." Behind him, deeper in the woods, something muffled and wet tried to scream. I never saw how I got out. I remember the sensation of walking for a long time through trees that kept repeating, same scar on the same trunk, same broken branch at eye level. Like I was stuck in a looped trail on a map that wouldn't load. I remember waking up in my truck at dawn, forehead pressed to the steering wheel, mouth tasting like pennies. My flashlight was in the cup holder, batteries still full. My radio was on the passenger seat. It was turned off, but the push-to-talk button was sticky. And tucked under the visor, clipped beside my permit book, was a fresh strip of yellow closure tape with my handwriting on it. "Closed. Do not enter. Hazard tree." Only this time, at the bottom, in smaller letters, it added, "Thank you for volunteering." Story 2. The campsite that wasn't on the map. The boys' shoes were too clean for someone who'd been missing for 3 days. They dangled from the edge of the picnic table as if he'd climbed up there to be taller, to be seen, to be found. White Velcro sneakers without a smear of mud, without pine needles caught in the seams. His legs swung in a lazy rhythm. He stared into my high beams like he didn't understand what light was for. I slammed the brakes and my truck rocked, gravel biting. The dashboard clock read 02.17. My breath fogged the windshield, even though the heater was blasting. "Hey," I shouted, already grabbing my flashlight, already feeling the cold bite under my uniform collar. "You okay?" The kid didn't flinch. The campground sign behind him said, "Whisper Falls, Loop B." But Loop B had been closed since last month when the bridge washed out. The gate was supposed to be locked. The road here was supposed to be impassable. And yet I was here. My tires sat on fresh tire tracks that weren't mine. I killed the engine, leaving only the tick-tick-tick of cooling metal and the low whine of the emergency radio scan. The air outside was wrong. Still dense, as if the forest had swallowed all wind and was holding it in its cheeks. I stepped out, and the cold hit like a slap. The beam of my flashlight caught the boy's face. Not a boy. Not really. His skin had that waxy, stretched look of someone who'd been in water too long. His eyes were wide and unfocused, reflecting the light like a deer's. His lips were pale. The corners of his mouth were cracked. And when he smiled, slowly, deliberately, his gums bled. "Ranger," he said. His voice was dry, like paper rubbed together. "We've been waiting." My stomach clenched. "Where are your parents?" He pointed, not toward any campsite I knew, but toward the tree line where the road disappeared into black. "Down there. They said you'd come if we stayed quiet." A sound drifted from the woods. It wasn't a voice. It was the steady, rhythmic thunk of something being hit against something else. Wood. Bone. My mind tried to label it and failed. I forced myself to keep the kid in my sight. "What's your name?" He tilted his head. His neck moved a little too far, like the joint was loose. "I don't remember." That should have been the moment I got back in my truck and drove until I hit pavement, until I hit another human being, until I hit anything that was anchored to reality. But the kid's shoes were clean, and my brain held on to that like a rope. Clean shoes meant he hadn't been lost long. Clean shoes meant someone had carried him. Clean shoes meant there was still time. I reached into my cab and grabbed the binder, the campground map packet we kept for visitors. It was old, laminated, marked with loops and site numbers and the little icons for bathrooms and water spigots. I flipped to Whisper Falls. Loop A, Loop C, day use area. No Loop B. There was no Loop B on the map. I looked up at the sign again, and the reflective letters shimmered in my beam like they were wet. Whisper Falls, Loop B below it, smaller, sites 3144. "Those sites don't exist," I muttered without meaning to. The boy's smile widened. "They do at night." Behind him in the woods, the thunking stopped. Silence crawled forward like a living thing. "Okay," I said, voice tight. "We're going to walk back to my truck." The boy slid off the table. His shoes hit the dirt without a sound. He didn't bend his knees. He just dropped. Like gravity, remembered him at the last second. He took my hand. His fingers were ice, not cold from the air, cold from deep inside, the kind of cold that makes your skin sting and your bones ache. My stomach flipped. I tried not to show it. We walked toward the truck. 2 steps, 3. The headlights flickered. Not electrical, not a bulb dying. Flicker like something passing through the beams, something thick enough to interrupt the light without showing a shape. The boy squeezed my hand. "Don't look up," he whispered. I looked up anyway. Between the trees, above the campground road, something hung in the air like a curtain. Not mist. Mist moves. This was still, heavy, rippling at the edges, as if it was holding back water. And behind it, faintly, were lights. Campsite lights, lanterns, campfires, strings of yellow bulbs, dozens of them, too many for a closed loop. And I could hear voices, laughter, chatter, the clink of metal on enamel. Normal campground sounds. My whole body leaned toward it without my permission. Like when you smell food you didn't know you were hungry for. "Ranger," the boy said, tugging. "They'll hear you." "I need to get you to safety," I said, and it came out like a plea. He looked at me with those wet, blank eyes. "This is safety." Behind the curtain, a woman screamed. It wasn't a horror movie scream. It was raw and short, cut off mid-breath, like someone grabbed her by the throat. The campground sound stopped instantly. Every laugh and clink and shuffle died. Then softly, as if everyone on the other side had turned their heads in unison, came a chorus of whispers. Not words I could understand at first, just breath and sibilance, like snakes in dry leaves. The curtain rippled. Something pressed against it from the other side, stretching it outward into a bulge. The outline was almost human, head, shoulders, arms. but the proportions were wrong. Too long, too thin. The hands splayed with too many points. The boy's voice dropped. "Don't talk. Don't shine your light. Don't let them know you see." My flashlight beam had already caught it. The bulge paused, as if it felt my attention like heat. Then the curtain pulled inward sharply, snapping back. From the woods all around us, the same whispering started. Close, closer, everywhere. Not behind the curtain, around us, in our world. The kid's grip tightened until my fingers went numb. He yanked me off the road and into the brush with the strength of a grown man. Branches clawed at my face. The smell of sap filled my nose. I stumbled, trying not to fall, trying not to lose him. We ducked behind a cluster of ferns so thick they hid us from the road. The headlights flickered again, and then the engine of my truck started. I froze. My keys were in my pocket. I hadn't touched the ignition. The boy's eyes went wide. He mouthed, silent, "Don't." My truck's driver door opened. A figure climbed in, tall, moving with that careful balance of someone in a uniform. The dome light came on briefly, illuminating the inside. The figure's face turned toward the windshield, toward the road, toward where I had been standing, and I saw my own profile, my own jawline, my hat brim, the same patch on the shoulder. The dome light clicked off. The truck shifted into gear. The boy's mouth barely moved. "They make copies," he whispered, voice breaking. "They keep the originals." My truck rolled forward, tires crunching gravel. It headed straight for the curtain of light. The curtain rippled as my headlights hit it. Then the truck disappeared. Not drove away, not turned, not faded. It was simply gone, swallowed by the air like a coin dropped into water. The campground road in front of us was suddenly empty, dark, silent. No tire tracks, no sign I'd ever been there. My hand still held the boy's, but when I looked down, I wasn't holding a child's hand anymore. I was holding a strip of yellow plastic tape, closure tape. It was warm, as if it had just been peeled off something alive. The boy's voice came from somewhere behind me, right at ear level. "Now you have to stay quiet too." I spun. The ferns were empty. No footprints, no rustle, no movement. Just the smell of sap and the steady whispering in the trees, like the whole forest had leaned in to listen for my next breath. Somewhere in the dark, a truck door slammed. My truck. And my voice, far away, called out like a ranger on patrol. "Hello? Anyone out here?" I didn't answer. I didn't move, because the whispering stopped the moment I stopped breathing. And in that silence, I realized something worse than being lost. I realized the forest was waiting to hear me inhale again. Story 3. The fire tower with 2 sets of footsteps. The trapdoor slammed shut under my boots, and the ladder rattled like it was trying to shake me off. Below, in the dark shaft, something climbed after me, fast, careful, the wood creaking under its weight in the same rhythm as mine. I threw my shoulder into the trapdoor, shoved the bolt, and felt the metal catch. The climbing stopped. Then, from directly under the hatch, came 3 slow knocks. Polite, like someone asking to be let in. My radio shrieked with feedback, then settled into a low hiss that sounded like distant rain. I didn't dare look away from the trapdoor long enough to unclench my fingers from the bolt. I'd been in the tower for 14 minutes, and already the air smelled like old pennies and wet dog. The fire lookout tower wasn't supposed to be staffed anymore. We used it for occasional night patrols, check vandalism, verify lightning strike reports, make sure no idiots were shooting at it. The tower sat on a ridge above the campground, a silhouette against the stars. It was a place you could see for miles. a place you couldn't hide. Yet someone had been waiting for me inside. I'd known the moment I stepped through the door. The smell wasn't dust and sun-baked wood like it should have been. It was body heat, breath. Something living had been up here recently, and it hadn't bothered to pretend otherwise. The map table had fresh scratches. The cot blanket was folded back as if someone had just stood up from it. And on the wall, above the old logbook rack, someone had written in charcoal, "You're late." I'd laughed then, nervous and annoyed, thinking it was some punk kid. I'd radioed in a quick update, even though dispatch was half asleep. I'd told myself it would be a simple citation, a story to tell later. Then I'd heard the footsteps on the ladder. Now I was alone in a glass box on stilts, trapped above a climbing thing that knocked politely. I forced myself to move. If I froze, I'd die up here with the windows watching. I stepped away from the trap door, keeping my eyes on it, and grabbed my flashlight and the old tower's spotlight handle. The spotlight was mounted to the floor, heavy and industrial, meant to scan for smoke. If something got in, I could at least blind it. The knocks came again. 3. Slow. Patient. Then my own voice drifted up through the trapdoor seam, muffled by wood. "Ranger Hayes, it's me. Open up." My stomach dropped. My name wasn't Hayes. Not on paper, not to anyone. Hayes was my father. He'd been a ranger before he drank himself into an early grave. I hadn't used that name since I was 17. My radio crackled. A voice, calm and clipped. "Unit 7, status check." Dispatch. Real dispatch. I grabbed the radio like it was a lifeline. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm in the lookout tower. I've got..." My throat closed. How do you say something is pretending to be me without sounding insane? The radio hissed. Then a different voice cut in. My voice. "Dispatch, false alarm. I'm fine." I stared at the radio. My thumb wasn't on the transmit. The indicator light glowed anyway. The knocking stopped. Silence thickened. Then, from beneath the trapdoor, a sound I can only describe as someone smiling too hard. A wet stretch. A crack of skin. "Hayes," my father's voice said softly. "Open the door." I backed toward the windows. The tower's glass wrapped around in a panorama. I could see the campground lights far below, tiny and warm. I could see the road cutting through the trees. I could see the ridgeline where the world ended into black. And then I saw something on the stairs leading up to the tower. A person, standing still halfway up, one hand on the railing, head tilted like it was listening. In my flashlight beam, I saw the uniform. The patch. The hat. I saw my own face. He looked up at me through the glass and smiled. Then slowly, he lifted his free hand and waved. My radio crackled again. "Unit 7, you have company," my voice said. I swung the spotlight down, aiming at the stairs. The beam hit the figure full on. White, harsh, unforgiving. It should have blinded anyone. He didn't blink. He kept smiling. Then he took one slow step upward. The tower creaked with his weight. I ran to the door, thinking I could bolt it, forgetting for a stupid split second that the door was down on the platform outside. The tower's interior door led to the balcony. If I opened it, I'd be face to face with whatever was climbing. But the trapdoor bolt behind me suddenly rattled. A hard shove from below, then another. The bolt held, but I felt the entire hatch flex. I was trapped between two entrances, the stairs outside and the ladder below. Two approaches, two versions of me. The spotlight handle trembled in my hands. My sweat felt cold on my ribs. The figure on the stairs reached the top platform. His boots thudded on the wood with a sound that carried up my bones. He placed a hand on the outer door handle. Then he paused, looked through the glass at me, and mouthed, something. I leaned closer without thinking. He mouthed, "We can't both stay." The trapdoor slammed upward again. The bolt screeched. The wood groaned like it was about to split. Then the voice under the hatch whispered, intimate as breath, "Pick one." The outer door handle turned. The balcony door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet pennies. The figure stepped into the doorway, backlit by starlight. Face still mine, but wrong at the edges. The smile too even. The eyes too flat. He spoke in my own voice. "Come on, let's go down. You're scaring yourself." Behind me, the hatch bolt finally snapped. The trapdoor flew open with a crack of wood. Something surged up the ladder, fast, too fast. A hand slapped onto the floorboards. Fingers long, joints bending in extra places. The skin was pale and stretched like it didn't fit. I screamed and swung the spotlight handle down like a bat. It connected with bone. The impact jolted up my arms. The thing hissed. Not a human noise. More like air forced through a wet slit. It pulled itself up into the room, and I saw its face. Not mine. My father's. But wrong. His features arranged as if someone had tried to remember him and failed. His eyes were too close together. His mouth was too wide. The smell coming off him was whiskey and decay. He smiled at me with bleeding gums. "Hayes," he whispered, and reached. The figure in the doorway stepped forward. His hand shot out, grabbed my wrist. Firm, human grip, warm. "Don't," he said urgently. "If it touches you, you'll remember everything." I yanked away from him instinctively. Bad choice. His grip tightened, not letting go, and his skin felt suddenly sticky, tacky like my radio button had been. My palm tried to pull free and it stretched, skin clinging like adhesive. Behind me, my father thing crawled fully onto the floor, limbs unfolding like a spider. It grabbed my ankle. Its fingers were freezing, digging into the tendon. I kicked, frantic, and felt something tear, skin, fabric, maybe both. Pain flared. The thing's nails slid under my sock like they were searching for a seam. The figure at the door pulled harder. "Come on!" he barked in my voice. "Move!" For one insane second, both of them were tugging me, one toward the door, one toward the hatch, like I was a rope in a game of tug-of-war. Then the tower itself shuddered. A deep groan ran through the wooden legs, up the walls, into the glass. The windows vibrated. Outside, the stars seemed to tilt. The world lurched as if the tower had been picked up and slightly rotated. The campground lights below shifted. Not position. Perspective, like I was seeing them from somewhere else. The figure at the door suddenly looked alarmed. "No," he whispered. "Not yet." The thing on my ankle tightened its grip, and the cold shot up my leg, into my knee, into my thigh. My vision blurred at the edges. And with the cold came a memory I didn't have. Standing at this tower as a kid, holding my father's hand, hearing him say, "If you ever hear yourself calling your name from the stairs, don't answer. That's not you. That's the tower keeping what it wants." I stumbled, half falling, and the figure at the door leaned close, face inches from mine. His eyes were my eyes, and they were full of panic. "Please," he said softly. "If you stay, I have to go back down." Then he let go. He stepped backward out the doorway, and as he did, the air around him rippled like the curtain at that closed loop, like the world was thin out there. He vanished. The balcony door slammed shut on its own. The thing at my ankle smiled wider. My father's voice, wet and loving, whispered, "Good boy." I don't remember leaving the tower. I remember waking up at dawn on the dirt road below, my uniform torn, my ankle bruised with hand-shaped marks that didn't match any human hand. My radio was dead, battery missing, and on the back of my left hand, written in charcoal, were 4 words. You picked the wrong one. Story 4. The bear box that breathed. The bear box lid rose an inch by itself, not with a creak, not with a squeal of hinges. It rose smoothly, like something inside was lifting it with fingertips. I froze mid-step, my flashlight beam locked on the metal rectangle, watching the gap widen and widen until the lid hovered open like a mouth held politely ajar. A warm, wet breath rolled out. It smelled like canned peaches and vomit. My stomach lurched, and I tasted last hour's gas station coffee. My hand tightened on my radio. The campground was supposed to be asleep. Quiet hours. No fires, no music, no wandering. Site 22 had been flagged earlier for food violations. Coolers left out, trash scattered, the usual tourist stupidity that ends with a bear euthanized. I'd come back at a 1:40 to check compliance. Now the bear box was breathing. Something shifted inside. Metal scraped. A slow, deliberate shuffle like a person turning over in bed. I took one step closer without meaning to, as if my body thought it could solve this by seeing it better. The breath came again, deeper, hungrier. Then a voice from inside the box said, muffled by steel, "Help!" Not a shout, not panic, just help, like someone asking you to pass the salt. I backed up so fast my heel hit the concrete picnic pad and I nearly fell. My beam shook, strobing across the campsite, tent zipped tight, no lights, no movement. A sleeping bag lump visible through nylon. The family was here, they were asleep. So who was in the bear box? Who is this? I demanded, voice low. Identify yourself? A pause, then, it hurts. Let me out. The lid lifted a fraction more, as if the answer had given it permission. I pictured everything I'd ever seen wedged in a bear box. Coolers, dog food, scented toiletries. I pictured a person folded in there, joints crushed, body cramping, skin pressed against cold metal. Then the smell hit again, and it wasn't human sweat. It was rot. Something sweetly decaying. My radio hissed with a burst of static. Over it, faint and distant, I heard laughter. Kids, maybe, echoing weirdly like it was coming through a tunnel. Dispatch, I said, even though I knew dispatch was 2 counties away and half asleep. Unit 14. I'm at Pine Knife Campground. Site 22. Possible. I couldn't finish. Possible what? Possible person trapped in bear box. Static answered. Then clear as day, a woman's voice came through. Not dispatch. Not any ranger. Don't open it, she said. Her voice shook like she was crying. I stared at the radio. Who is this? The woman inhaled sharply. Don't open it. The bear box made a sound like a throat clearing. Then the voice inside changed. It became a child's voice, a little girl, maybe 6. Ranger, it said, hopeful. My mom said you'd help. My blood went cold. I swung my flashlight to the tent. A small pink bicycle leaned against the picnic table. A stuffed rabbit sat on the bench. A child was definitely here. My mind tried to connect dots in a way that made sense. Maybe the child had crawled into the box playing hide and seek. Maybe the lid had shut. Maybe she was trapped, struggling to breathe. But the bear box lid wasn't shut. It was open, holding itself open. I took a step toward the tent, my voice shaking. Ma'am? Sir? Rangers? Wake up. Nothing. No movement inside the tent. No rustle. No sleepy groan. I approached slowly, keeping the bear box in my peripheral vision. My beam caught the tent zipper. It was sealed with yellow closure tape. Fresh, neatly applied along every seam like a crime scene. My fingers went numb. I hadn't taped this tent. No ranger had reported a closure. There shouldn't be closure tape in a campsite with sleeping people. The bear box breathed again, and this time it sounded pleased. I reached for the tent zipper anyway, because the sight of the tape made my brain snap into emergency mode. I grabbed the edge of the tape, peeled. It came off too easily, like it wanted to be removed. Underneath, the zipper pull was already undone. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard, tasting bile. I pulled the zipper down. The tent flap fell open. Inside were sleeping bags, arranged. Pillows. A phone charger plugged into nothing. A half-empty water bottle. No people. No bodies. Just the impression of bodies. Like someone had carefully staged the shapes and then removed the humans, leaving their warmth behind. The sleeping bags were still warm. I felt it with the back of my hand when I leaned in. Heat radiating, recent. My radio crackled again with the same woman's voice, now broken by sobs. "You're doing it again," she whispered. "Every time you come on night shift, you do it. Again." "Who are you?" I hissed. "Where are they?" The woman laughed, a horrible sound. "You don't remember. You never remember." The bear box lid lifted wider. Something pale slid into view inside the darkness. Fingers, long and wet, curling around the edge from within. They weren't bear claws. They were too delicate, too human. But there were too many of them. A second set of fingers appeared beside the first, then a third, all gripping the lid as if multiple people were inside, stacked, holding it up together. The child's voice came again, closer now, like it was right at the opening. "Ranger, please. It's so dark in here." My legs trembled. I forced myself to pivot, putting my back to the tent, facing the box fully. My beam stabbed into the open mouth. At first I saw nothing. Then my light caught an eye. Human eye, glossy, staring up at me from the bottom of the box. Then another eye above it. Then another. Faces layered in there like plates, cheeks pressed against metal, mouths opening and closing without sound as they tried to breathe through each other's breath. They weren't dead. Their skin was pink, flushed, alive. But their expressions were wrong. Not panic, not fear. Expectation. Like they were waiting for me to make a choice. The woman on the radio whispered, "If you open it all the way, they'll come out." I started, but my voice broke. I didn't do this. I didn't put them in there. I wasn't the monster. The eyes inside blinked slowly, in unison. The fingers tightened on the lid. And then, from the deepest part of the box, something larger shifted. Something that made the faces tilt, made their eyes roll as they were pushed aside. A shape moved forward, pressing them like soft obstacles. A mouth appeared, far too wide, lips stretched thin. It smiled, revealing teeth that looked like human teeth, but too many, layered. It spoke in my own voice, calm and official. "Food storage violation," it said. "Failure to comply results in removal." My knees buckled. I caught myself on the picnic table, feeling splinters bite into my palm. I wanted to run. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to tear my ears off so I couldn't hear my own voice used like a weapon. The bear box lid rose fully. The faces inside inhaled at once, a collective gasp, sucking the cold night air like drowning people. The thing behind them exhaled. And the breath smelled exactly like me. Coffee, sweat, and the cheap spearmint gum I chewed to stay awake. I ran. I didn't look back. Behind me, metal slammed and slammed as if the bear box was being kicked from the inside. I heard soft footsteps on pine needles, many, many feet moving together, scuffing and slipping in the dark. When I reached my truck, my hands shook so badly I fumbled the keys twice. The engine roared to life. Headlights blasted the road. And in the beams, standing dead center like a deer frozen, was a little girl. Pink pajamas, bare feet, stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. She looked up at me and smiled with bleeding gums. Then she lifted her other hand and tapped her finger to her lips. Shh. I slammed the brakes. She vanished. The road ahead was empty, but on my passenger seat, where I hadn't left anything, sat a strip of yellow closure tape. Warm. And faintly, beneath the adhesive, I could feel the pulse of something trying to breathe. Story 5. The trail register that kept my name. The register box was already open when my headlights hit it. That shouldn't have been possible. The metal tube at the trailhead had a stiff latch and a padlock that stuck in winter. It took me a full minute with a key and 2 curses to open on a good day. Tonight, it yawned open like someone had pried it with fingers. The logbook inside was flipped to a page in the middle. A pen lay across it, uncapped, ink glistening wet. And on the paper, written in block letters I recognized as mine, was a single line. Ranger Elias Kent entered EO003, alone. I wasn't Elias Kent. My name was different on my badge, different on my driver's license, different in every system. But Elias Kent was the name my mother had wanted, the name she'd written on the ultrasound photo before my father crossed it out and said, "That's not a man's name." I hadn't seen it in decades. My throat dried instantly. Behind me, the forest made a soft clicking sound, like someone tapping a fingernail against glass. I didn't turn. I stared at the ink on the page, at how fresh it was, how it bled slightly into the paper fibers like it had been written seconds ago. My radio hissed once. Then, "Unit 3, you got a report of lights up there?" It was another ranger, Barrett, on night patrol down by the lake. Real voice, real person, the normal world reaching for me. I swallowed hard. "Negative," I forced out. "I'm at the North Fork trailhead. Checkin'." My radio cut off mid-sentence. Not static, not a dead battery, a clean click, like someone had simply turned it off. I looked down. The power knob was still on, yet the radio was silent. In the woods, that clicking sound came again, closer. Tap, tap, tap. I snapped my flashlight beam toward the tree line. Nothing. Just trunks, brush, and the ribbon of trail cutting into darkness. A signpost listed the trail name, mileage, hazards. North Fork, 7.4 miles. No water after mile 2. Turn around before dark. Someone had scratched a new line into the sign with something sharp. Turn around before you remember. My skin prickled. I felt suddenly watched, not from one direction, but from the whole forest, as if the night itself had eyes. I should have left. Should have gotten in the truck and driven back to the ranger station with the lights on and the heater blasting and the windows up, pretending the woods couldn't reach through glass. Instead, I did what rangers do when a trailhead looks wrong. I stepped onto the trail. The first 50 yards were normal. Dirt, roots, the smell of damp leaves. My beam caught reflective trail markers nailed to trees, bright squares winking back. I told myself I'd go just far enough to check for campers. Just far enough to see if someone was hiking illegally at night. Just far enough. Then the trail markers changed. Instead of the standard reflective squares, they were strips of yellow closure tape tied in neat bows around branches. Each strip fluttered faintly, even though the air was still. Each strip had writing on it in my handwriting. Keep going, keep going, keep going. My stomach tightened. The farther I walked, the more the forest seemed to lean inward. Sounds dampened. My footsteps felt muffled, like the dirt was swallowing the noise. Even my breath sounded too loud. At exactly the point where my watch read 0013, my flashlight flickered. Once, twice. Then the beam stabilized. But the light had changed. Less white, more yellow, like an old bulb. My battery indicator still showed full. I stopped walking. The forest stopped with me. No insects, no distant owls, no wind. Complete, oppressive silence. Then, from somewhere ahead on the trail, came the sound of someone else taking a step. A boot crunching softly on gravel. I lifted my light. Hello? My voice sounded flat, swallowed by trees. A second step. Closer, then a third. I backed up instinctively, and my heel hit something hard. I looked down. A rock cairn. Stacked stones, 5 high, perfectly balanced, too clean to have been made by hikers in the dark. On top of it sat my ranger hat, my real hat, the one I was wearing earlier, the one that was currently still on my head. I touched my brim. It was there. I looked back at the cairn. The hat on the stones was also there. Same scuff on the left side. Same sweat stain on the band. Same little tear by the adjustment strap. 2 hats. One of them shouldn't exist. A laugh came from ahead, soft and familiar. My laugh. Elias, it called gently. Come on. The name landed in my chest like a weight. Memory flared. My mother whispering it, my father shouting, the ultrasound photo, the black marker crossing it out. I hadn't thought about that in years. Yet hearing it now felt like someone prying open a locked drawer in my skull. I'm not, I started. You are, my voice said from the dark. You just don't like what you did as him. The trail behind me was gone. Not hidden, not hard to see. Gone. Where there should have been a corridor back to the parking area, there was only dense brush and trees, unbroken. The world behind me had sealed like skin healing over a wound. My pulse hammered. I turned in a slow circle, flashlight searching, and every direction looked the same. Trees, tape, darkness. The clicking sound returned, right beside my ear. Tap, tap, tap. I whipped the light to the right. A man stood there between 2 trunks. Uniform, hat, badge patch, my face. He held the trail register logbook in one hand like a menu. In the other, he held the pen. The uncapped pen. His smile was polite. His eyes were bright, too bright, reflecting the beam like an animal. You signed in? He said, tapping the page. Alone? He stepped closer. His boots made no sound. The air around him smelled faintly of fresh ink and cold metal. I didn't, I whispered. He tilted his head. You always say that. Behind him, deeper in the woods, I saw movement, shapes between trees, half hidden. People? Animals? Something else? Their eyes caught my light in scattered points, dozens of reflections at different heights. The man with my face lifted the pen. You're late, he said softly. We've been holding your place. He reached out and with the pen tip, touched the skin on the inside of my wrist. The cold sting was immediate, like a needle. I yanked back, but he'd already drawn something, ink bleeding into my skin. Letters, E-L-I-A-S. My stomach heaved. I scrubbed at it with my thumb, but it didn't smear. It wasn't ink on top of skin. It was ink in skin. The shapes in the trees leaned closer, their eyes brightening. The man smiled wider. Now you remember where to go. My vision blurred at the edges, not from tears, from something shifting. The trees seemed to slide slightly, like the forest was rearranging itself. The air tasted metallic. My tongue felt numb. I stumbled backward and hit the cairn. Stones toppled silently, as if gravity was optional here. The second hat fell into the dirt. When it hit, it didn't land like cloth. It landed like meat. A wet slap. The brim twitched once, like cartilage. I gagged and ran, not on the trail because there was no trail, but in the direction my body chose, crashing through brush, branches tearing at my uniform, my lungs burning. The clicking sound followed, always just behind, always tapping. At some point, light appeared through trees, my truck's headlights. I burst out onto gravel, half sobbing, and there was the trailhead. The register box was closed, padlock intact. The sign was normal, no scratched warning. I fumbled my radio. It crackled to life immediately. Barrett's voice came through, annoyed. "Unit 3, you copy? I've been calling you for 10 minutes. I looked down at my wrist. The letters were still there, black and sharp. ELIAS. And beside the register box, on the ground, was a single strip of yellow closure tape tied in a neat bow. It fluttered in air that still had no wind. Written on it in my handwriting were 2 words. See you soon. Story 6. The lost and found bag that was too heavy. I knew the bag was wrong the moment I tried to lift it. It looked like a normal lost and found sack, black trash bag, tied at the top, tagged with a little white label. We kept them in the back of the visitor center until someone came looking for their missing cooler or jacket or kid's toy. This one was behind the building near the dumpsters, half hidden under a pallet. The label read, Found, Lupa, Items, date 0819. No ranger initials, no entry in the log. And when I grabbed the knot and pulled, the bag didn't shift like trash. It resisted like it was full of wet sand or meat. The plastic stretched under my grip, and I felt something inside press back, rounded, firm, unmistakably anatomical. I let go so fast I nearly fell backward. My flashlight beam jittered across the bag, catching faint wet smears on the plastic as if it had been dragged. The visitor center behind me was dark, locked. The campground was closed for the night. The only light was my beam and the dull glow of the moon reflected in the dumpster lids. My radio hissed. Nothing else. No crickets. No wind. I crouched, unwilling but unable to stop myself, and leaned close enough to smell it. Not garbage, not food, chlorine, like a public pool. And underneath that, the coppery sweetness of blood. A sound came from inside the bag, soft, rhythmic. A thump. Pause. Thump. Like a heartbeat. I backed away, my stomach folding in on itself. Nope, I whispered to the empty night. Then the bag shifted. Not rolling, not settling. It shifted toward me as if something inside had pushed against the plastic from the far side. Thump. Pause. Thump. The heartbeat sped up. My skin prickled. I forced my voice into Ranger command mode. Hello? This is park staff. If you can hear me, make noise. The bag replied with a wet scrape, like fingernails dragging along plastic. Then a voice whispered, muffled and close. I'm here. The words were so quiet, I felt them more than heard them, like the bag was speaking through the air into my teeth. My chest tightened. I scanned the area. Dumpsters, shadows, the edge of the tree line. No movement. I pulled my phone from my pocket to call for backup. The screen lit up and immediately displayed the camera app, front-facing. My own face stared back at me, pale and sweaty in the glow. But behind my face, in the blackness, was another face, pressed close to the camera as if standing right behind me. Its eyes were too open, its mouth stretched in a smile that showed gums more than teeth. I spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the screen, the camera app had closed. My phone showed the home screen like nothing had happened. The bag thumped faster. The voice inside whispered again, "Don't leave me." I shouldn't have touched it. I know that. I know it with the kind of certainty you only get after the fact, when you're replaying the moment that broke your life. But the voice sounded like a teenager, like someone trapped, like someone who needed help. And the chlorine smell made me think of the river. We'd had a drowning last week. A teenage boy swept under at a bend. We'd searched for 2 days, never found him, just his flip-flops on the bank. I swallowed hard and reached for the knot again, fingers shaking. The plastic was warm, not warmed by sun, warm like skin. I yanked the knot loose. The bag's mouth loosened, opening. A wave of smell rolled out, chlorine, blood, and something sour, like a stomach emptied in panic. I aimed my flashlight inside. At first I saw nothing but darkness and glossy plastic folds. Then my beam caught a hand, not severed, attached. A pale hand curled in the bag, fingers wrinkled like they'd been in water. The wrist disappeared deeper into the darkness. The hand moved. It reached upward, slow, tentative, toward the opening. My breath caught. Okay, I'm going to pull you out, I said, voice cracking. I've got you. The hand paused, then the fingers spread wide, pressing against the plastic rim. There were too many fingers. Not 6, not 7. Dozens. Hands layered on hands, each one pale, each one wrinkled, each one reaching. The bag wasn't holding one body, it was holding a pile. The plastic stretched, and I heard wet sliding inside, bodies shifting against each other. A face rose into view. Teenage boy, eyes open, waterlogged, mouth slack. His lips moved. Found, he whispered. Then another face rose beside his. A woman, older, her hair floating in tangles like river weeds. She smiled with bleeding gums. Found, she whispered too. The bag's interior seemed deeper than the bag should allow. The darkness inside didn't reflect my light properly. It felt like staring into a well. And from that well, something breathed, slow, huge. My radio crackled loudly, making me jump. A voice came through, distorted. Do not open. Too late. The hands surged upward suddenly, not frantic but eager, like hungry people reaching for food. They grabbed the bag's rim, my wrist, my sleeve. Cold fingers dug into my skin. I yelped and tried to pull back. The bag pulled back harder. The force was shocking. Like the bag had weight beyond physics, like something inside had anchored it to the earth. My boots slid on gravel. My shoulder jerked. Pain shot up my arm as fingers tightened around my wrist. The faces inside stared at me with identical expressions, expectant, grateful, hungry. Found, they whispered, over and over. The visitor center door behind me rattled. I snapped my head around and saw the door handle turning, slowly, as if someone inside was unlocking it from the dark. But the center was locked, empty. I checked it myself. The handle turned anyway. Then the door opened inward. A thin line of darkness spilled out, not shadow, not lack of light. It spilled like liquid. And in that dark doorway stood me. Uniform, hat, calm expression. He held a clipboard like a lost and found log. Good, he said in my voice. You brought it back. The hands in the bag tightened their grip. They began pulling. My copied self stepped closer, smiling gently as if I was a visitor with a question about trail conditions. We don't like when things go missing, he said. We like when they're found. The last thing I remember clearly is the sensation of my wrist bones grinding as I fought, and the way the bag's interior darkness seemed to widen, as if it could open enough to swallow not just bodies, but space. I woke up at dawn on the visitor center floor. The door was shut, locked. My keys were in my pocket. My wrist was bruised in the shape of many fingers. In the lost and found cabinet, behind the counter, there was a new bag. Black, tied neatly. A white label on it read, "Found, Loop A, Ranger, date 0819. And when I pressed my ear against the plastic, I heard a steady, patient heartbeat. Story 7. The ranger station lights that kept turning on. The station lights came on at 0306, even though I'd cut the breaker myself. I watched it from the turnout. Across the road, yellow glow in every window, steady as if the building was awake and working. The flagpole out front cast a long shadow across the gravel. The sign that read National Park Service looked freshly cleaned in the light, almost inviting. There was only one problem. I was the only ranger on duty, and the station was supposed to be empty. I'd locked it an hour ago after finishing paperwork, sworn I'd sleep in my truck for the remainder of the shift, because the radios had been acting up, and the air in the bunk room felt crowded. I'd driven out to the turnout to watch the campground road and clear my head. Then the station lit up like someone had come in and made coffee. My radio crackled once, unprompted. A voice came through, low and amused. "Finally," it said. "You noticed?" It was my supervisor's voice, except my supervisor was on leave, 2 states away, recovering from surgery. I'd spoken to him yesterday. He'd sounded weak and drugged, and very human. This voice sounded healthy, present, smiling. I stared at the station, pulse thumping. "Who is this?" I demanded into the radio. A pause, then, "Come inside. You left your logbook." I hadn't. I had it in the truck beside me. I could reach over and touch the binder. The station door opened. I saw it clearly through the windshield. Front door swinging inward, slow and smooth. No gust of wind to push it. Darkness inside. Then a silhouette crossed the lobby window. Someone walking toward the counter. Someone wearing a brimmed hat. My stomach tightened into a knot so hard, it felt like a fist. I started the truck. The engine turned over with a harsh cough, louder than it should have been in the still night. Headlights flooded the station front. In the beam, I saw something standing in the doorway. A person, uniform, hat, my face. He raised a hand and waved me in, casual. Then he stepped back into the station, disappearing into the lighted lobby, like he belonged there. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Every sane part of me screamed to drive away, to leave the park boundary, to put miles between me and whatever was happening. But the station held every resource I needed: landline, backup radio, keys to gates, the emergency locker. If something was wrong, I needed to anchor myself to procedure, to concrete reality. So I did what I hate admitting I did. I got out of the truck. The cold air hit my lungs like broken glass. I crossed the road, boots crunching frost on gravel, and the station lights buzzed faintly overhead, a sound like insects trapped in a jar. The door was open. Warm air leaked out, smelling faintly of coffee and bleach. I stepped inside. The lobby was empty. The front desk was clean. The pamphlet racks were neatly arranged. The old bear safety poster hung straight on the wall. Everything looked normal, too normal, like a set built to resemble a ranger station. My radio clicked. "Behind the counter," my supervisor's voice said, amused. "You'll see." I moved toward the counter, flashlight in hand, though the overhead lights made it pointless. My reflection slid across the glass case that held confiscated knives and illegal fireworks. Behind the counter, the logbook sat open. Not my current binder. The old logbook, the one we kept archived in a cabinet from previous years. It was open to a page dated March 14th, 2023. My stomach dropped. That was the date of the night we lost Ranger Lila Soren, my partner. She'd gone out on a missing person call and never returned. We found her truck idling by a closed loop, door open, radio on the ground, pushed to talk, sticky with something we couldn't identify. We never found her. On the open page, in neat handwriting, was a patrol entry. 03-06, Ranger Soren returned to station, alone. I stared until my eyes burned. That's not true, I whispered. The lights flickered once. Then, from the back hallway that led to the bunk rooms, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, boots on linoleum. I backed away from the counter, heartbeat pounding. A voice called out softly from the hallway. Lila's voice. "Hey," it said gently, like she was coming in from a cold patrol. "You still up?" My throat closed. I hadn't heard her voice in years except in dreams. The footsteps continued. A shadow slid along the hallway wall. My radio crackled again, supervisor voice now colder. "Don't talk to her." "Why?" I whispered, barely audible. "Because she's not the one who's missing," the radio said. "You are." The lobby lights brightened suddenly, flaring harsh. The glass in the front windows reflected my face back at me, pale and scared. But in the reflection, behind my shoulder, stood another version of me. Closer than possible, smiling. I spun. Nothing. I spun back to the windows. The reflection still showed him. And he lifted his hand, placed it gently on my reflected shoulder, and leaned close to my reflected ear, as if whispering a secret. The hallway footsteps stopped. Layla's voice came again, now right at the hallway entrance. "Why are you standing like that?" she asked softly. "Did you see it too?" A figure stepped into view. Uniform, hair tucked under a beanie, face pale in the fluorescent light. Lila. She looked almost the same as I remembered, except her eyes were wrong. Too glossy, too fixed. Her smile was too calm. She held something in her hand. My radio. My exact radio. Same scuffs, same serial number sticker, half peeled. It was still turned on. The push-to-talk button was sticky. She walked toward me slowly, boots silent now. "Come on," she said, gentle. "We have to finish the report." My supervisor's voice hissed through my radio. "Don't let her hand you the radio." I backed away until my shoulders hit the front door. Cold air leaked around the frame. My hand found the door handle. Locked. It hadn't been locked when I entered. Lila stopped 3 feet away. She held the radio out to me with both hands, like an offering. "Take it," she whispered. "You left it at the loop. You always do." I shook my head, tears hot in my eyes from fear and grief, and the sudden sick hope that maybe this was real. Maybe she was alive. Maybe... The reflected version of me in the window opened his mouth, and I heard my own voice whisper directly into my head. "If you take it, you can go home." My hands twitched, wanting. Lila's smile widened slightly, gums bleeding at the edges. "Take it," she repeated. Behind her, in the hallway, more footsteps began. Many pairs, synchronized. Shadows moved, sliding along the walls like a crowd approaching. My radio crackled one last time with my supervisor's voice, almost pleading now. "If you take it, you stay." I looked at Lila. I looked at the radio in her hands. I looked at the window, reflection where my smiling double waited, hand still on my shoulder. And I realized something with sudden clarity. The station lights had turned on at 3:06 because that's when they always turned on. Because that's when someone always came back. Alone. My fingers brushed the radio without meaning to. Just a touch. A test. It was warm. It pulsed faintly under my skin like a heartbeat. And the moment my skin made contact, the overhead lights went out. Total darkness. In that darkness, dozens of voices whispered my name, not my badge name, but the one my mother had wanted, the one I never used, the one that felt like a door opening in my skull. And somewhere very close, Lila's voice whispered, satisfied. Return logged. When the sun rose, the station was dark, locked and empty. My truck sat in the turnout across the road, engine cold, keys in the cup holder. On the station counter, inside where I couldn't reach, the old logbook lay open to today's date, and the newest entry, written in neat, familiar handwriting, read 036. Ranger returned to station, alone. Except the name beside it wasn't Lila's. It was mine.